Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome to episode 12 of our series with Sherman Leader, the penultimate episode, or the good to great episode perhaps, because right now in the campaign we've got a good evaluation. We need to wipe out this last German battalion in this last battle to get a great evaluation of the campaign, but we have it all to do. This is a tank battalion. We've only got 4 units left. We're sending 1 tank against 4, and our tank has a cracked hull. And there's a special rule for this German battalion where they get +2 on their tank attack rolls against us. The odds are highly stacked against us. Let's jump in and see if somehow we can get some miracle dice rolls and pull this one out. Here's a quick overview. So far in this campaign, in 2.5 weeks, we've fought 4 battles, amassing 16 points. That gives us a good evaluation at present. To get a great evaluation, we need 2 more points, and to get that, we have to wipe out this last German battalion that we're going to face in this battle. If we take a look at the operational map, here is the current situation. In the enemy transit area lies this battalion, 2A. Now, it is a small tank force consisting of 4 tanks, 2 half-tracks, and 4 armored cars. That's what we have to destroy. Of special note, Gary Logs on Wargame Geek pointed out that there's a special rule where it says enemy tanks gain +2 on attack rolls, which of course is going to make our job a lot harder and make the German tanks much more deadly as we face them. The first thing that we need to do in the battle is to draw an event card. I'm hoping we get something beneficial for us. Ooh. This is actually very interesting. Inspiring Leader. Add a total of 2 command tactic counters to your highest skill level participating commander. Most excellent. Okay, so let's see what that means. So we have 2 commanders that are equal skill. Sergeant Hart, who commands our mortar team, and Sergeant Myers, who is commanding the M4 jumbo tank with the cracked hull. We're going to give the tactics counter to Sergeant Myers because Sergeant Hart already has one. And by giving it to Sergeant Myers in our M4 jumbo, assuming the tank survives a couple turns, that will allow him to go twice in the same turn 2 times, which hopefully will give us 2 extra attacks. This could be very helpful indeed. So here's a look at our map setup. At first I was a little bit concerned by this heavy terrain in here, but this is impassable to armored vehicles, and the entire German tank battalion can't go through here. So their path is either going to be through here, through this low cover, or through this open space here, probably depending upon where they set up. We'll be able to set up in this bocage, which can only be attacked from a range of 0 or 1. So at first I was a little bit concerned by all this cover up here, but this might work out pretty well if the Germans get aggressive dice rolls and have to move across this terrain to us. If we have to close on them, we're going to have to go this way or across open terrain, and that would be the reverse situation, a pretty bad scenario. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm cautiously optimistic it might be okay for us. Here are our 4 heroes and the teams that will be going into battle today for us to try to get us this victory. Sergeant Kelly has his rifle team. We're going to be pushing them forward. We want them to be taking our shots because we want to keep both Sergeant Hart with his mortar team back probably in the bocage to lob mortars in on the enemies. Sergeant Myers we're going to put in the bocage. He's coming in with the 2 tactics counter now and the cracked hull on his jumbo. And then Sergeant Wagner, who has an experienced rifle team, which actually isn't that bad. It has an AP attack of 7, so it's not going to be that bad against armored units. So we're going to push him forward as well with his rifle team in hopes that they can close on the tanks and maybe pick up 1 or 2 kills against those armored units. Again, our rifle team and our experienced rifle team are going to have to be in the same hex as the enemy units in order to be able to attack them. So we're going to have to send them up through the woods on the right hand side, and well, we'll see what happens. So here's our setup. We've got our tank and our mortar unit right here so they can move into the bocage on the first turn. As part of our setup, we can move our infantry units at 2 squares. So we've pushed both Sergeant Kelly and Sergeant Wagner up through the bocage into this impassable forested terrain here to help them close on the enemy. So we're ready. Let's get the Germans set up. Here's a look at the German small tank force. Now we have to draw randomly on the tanks that are in this force, and we got lucky this time. The Panzer IIIs are by far the easiest tanks to destroy. Panzer IVs are the second, and Stugs and the Tiger we did not even draw. So we got 2 Panzer IIIs and 2 Panzer IVs, which will help us out. There's also 4 armored cars and 2 half-tracks. Here's a bird's eye view after we've placed the German units by random setup, and this looks pretty good as the vast majority of them ended up here on the left side of the map. I mean, these are the two most common hexes they're going to end up on. But this unit looks like if it's going to advance, it will come this way, perhaps? I don't know. Actually, this way, because it's going to go in high terrain. So it looks like by the German movement rules, most of the stuff, if it does get advance orders, will come at us this way through these open squares, which could work to our advantage. But it's time. Let's get the battle going. Let's roll for the German movement aggressiveness on the 10-sided die. Let's see what we get. A 2. Unfortunately, Germans will be using a 6-sided die, which is less aggressive. I think more aggressive would have helped us out here, but oh well. So, 3 of our units, Sergeant Wagner's rifle team, Sergeant Hart's mortar team, and Sergeant Meyer's jumbo, have tactical counters that would allow us to go before the Germans move. We're going to have Sergeant Wagner hold on his, because I don't think it makes sense to use it. We want to see if we can pull the armor towards us. But Sergeant Hart can't move and fire in the same turn, so we're going to expend Sergeant Hart's counter and have him take his squad up into the bocage. So then in the second half of this turn, they'll be able to start lobbing mortars at the Germans. Likewise, we're going to have Sergeant Myers, who can actually move and fire with only minimal penalty. He's going to move forward and start to fire, so let's have him open up on some of these tanks that we can see. Alright, so Sergeant Myers is going to shoot at this Panzer IV. The way range works in Sherman Leader is that if the shortest path of hexes is open, then you can fire. And so 1, 2, 3, that's an open path to this hex, so Sergeant Myers can fire. Range of 3 means you're going to subtract 2 from the dice rolls. Normally he needs 6s or better to hit, so he would need 8s or better. However, Sergeant Myers is skilled now, so 8s or better becomes 6s or better, 2 shots to hit. Here's the first battle. 9 and a 7. Sergeant Myers gets us off to a promising start. Let's see if we can destroy the Panzer IV. It has a defense of 3, but it's in high defensive terrain, so it needs 5s or less on both of these to negate them. Let's get this off to a good start. Fingers crossed. A 10 and a 2. We've got it. Sergeant Myers picks up a kill. The Panzer IV is eliminated. On the very first turn before the Germans move, we're able to knock out 1 tank. This is a good start. Let's roll for German movement. 3. Advance to cover if you're a tank or half-track, adjacent cover if you're a half-track. Let's see how this plays out. So let's take a look at the half-tracks. Their movement orders are adjacent cover, and they go to the highest cover that's available if there's more than 1 hex there beside. That means, by the rules, they have to go to one of these 3. This one would make the most sense for them. I would much rather, again, this is one of those you decide things, and I would much rather push them back here, but we're going to make them a little bit more logical and move up here. Likewise, this half-track also will move to adjacent cover, which is this one, a little bit closer, perhaps. No, actually the same distance from the enemy, but probably in a better position. Now, the half-track has a range of 1, so it cannot attack these infantry units that are down off the south end of the map. Let's work our way across from right to left here. The Panzer III has orders to advance to cover. It cannot do that because this is impassable to armored units, and it cannot move in the open, but it can fire then, so it will hold, it will not move. It will fire, and it's going to take aim at Sergeant Kelly's rifle unit. It will need a 5 to hit normally, but at range of 2, it's going to need 6s or better to hit against soft target, and they get +2 to their attack rolls on the enemy tanks, so instead of 6s, it's going to be 4s to better to hit. 2 shots. 1 and an 8. 1 hit gets through on Sergeant Kelly's unit. Sergeant Kelly is in high defensive terrain, has a defense of 3, so he needs a 5 or less to negate it. 2. Excellent, no damage. Now, one of the things I was just thinking about is it might make sense for us to pull our infantry units back to the bocage, because on a die roll of a 5 or a 6, the German tanks are going to advance if cannot attack, and that would pull them out into the open. So we'll think about that at the end of this move once we get the German turn done. That would save a lot of shots on our units too. This armored car likewise has movement orders too. Advance to cover, it can't do that, so it has a range of 3. It's going to fire on Sergeant Kelly again. Attack is normally a 6. At range 2, it is a 7 or better to hit. It's not a tank, so just regular die rolls. 2 shots, 7s or better. 4 and a 4, both misses. Let's move over here to the Panzer III. It has movements to advance to cover, which is capable of doing by moving closer to this square here. It will likewise fire on Sergeant Kelly. Normally the Panzer III needs 5s or better to hit against soft targets. It'd be 6s or better at range 1. However, it's also moved, so it's going to be -1, so 7s are better, but you get its +2 on its attack roll, so 5s are better, 2 shots. 3 and a 7, we get 1 hit. Oops, a little bit of a damage there. 1 hit on Sergeant Kelly, needs a 5 or less to negate it. A 1, excellent. So far, so good. All right, next up we have advance to cover orders for these armored cars. They could go to either one of these squares. We'll just move them here. I'm not sure it really matters. And it will fire at Sergeant Kelly. It needs a 6 or better to hit, but because it's moved, it needs a 7 or better, and at range 2 it needs 8s or better, 2 shots. A 10 and an 8. Ooh, that's nasty. 2 hits by this armored. 2 and a 3. Nice. Dice roll gods are smiling on us so far. I mean, this can change in an instant, but so far so good. Let's do the next armored car. Moves up, same spot, same shot. It needs 8s or better to hit, 2 shots. 2 and a 2. Both misses. Excellent. Let's next this one. Firing at range 2, 8s or better, 2 shots. 7 and a 6. 2 misses. Nice. And lastly, our Panzer IV will move up here. By far the most deadly tank left in the unit left. It will fire on Sergeant Kelly. Normally needs a 4. It has moved, so it needs a 5. It's range 2, so it needs a 6, but it gains +2 on its attack roll, so it needs 4s or better. 2 shots. 10 and an 8. 2 hits. This is going to be a nasty one. All right, Sergeant Kelly, hang in there. 5s or less to negate it. 2 and a 2. Oh, the dice roll gods have smiled on our heroes today. It's now our turn to return fire. So we have a big decision to make with these 2 infantry units. These are the only targets for the Germans right now. Now their movement order, they have a 6-sided die. If they roll a 5 or a 6 on their movement order, the armored cars and the tanks will have movement orders that say advance if cannot attack. That will bring them all into these 2 open squares right here, which will allow our tank and our mortar unit to fire on them in the open with reduced defense. I like the chances of having that happen. I think that will give us better odds of destroying this battalion. So we're going to take a bold move here and retreat with our infantry units back into the bocage, which means that the German squads up here, none of these units have targets they can shoot at. I think if we run out of time later, we can push them up, but I'm hoping that in one of the next 2 turns, we'll get a 5 or a 6, which will push the armored cars out into the open so we can hit them at greater damage. So, risky move here, but now we still have a couple units left. We have Sergeant Myers and his jumbo can fire. By far the most dangerous target left is this Panzer IV. Sergeant Myers is skilled. He has an AP attack of 6. He's firing at range 3, which means it's 8s. However, we get a +2 on his die rolls, meaning it's 6s or greater to shoot and hit at this Panzer IV. 2 and a 10. We get 1 hit. Panzer IV is in high terrain. It needs a 3 normally, 5s or less to survive, a 6 or greater when we've got the second Panzer IV. 9! Yes! Sergeant Myers brought his mojo today. Second kill on a Panzer IV, and Sergeant Myers has taken out our second tank. Let's have Sergeant Hart now fire with his mortars. Now, the mortars normally have an attack of 6 against armor. We're going to go after the Panzer III up here. Let's actually go after this one. That's probably doesn't really matter, I guess. We're going to go after this one right here. Sergeant Hart normally needs 6s or better, but at range 3, he needs 8s or better. However, at range 1+, we add 2 to his die roll, so it goes back down to 6s or better to mortar on this Panzer III. 2 and a 4. Okay, that's a miss. At the start of turn 2, we could have Sergeant Myers expend his tactic counter and fire, and we could have Sergeant Wagner do it, but we're not. We're going to see if we can get the armor out into the open. So let's go right to the German half of the turn. We're going to pass on our tactics counter use. The roll that we want is a 5 or a 6. Advance if cannot attack. Let's see if the dice roll gods continue to shine on us here. A 3. God, advance to cover. So that's going to change things for the Germans. Let's see their movement now. This is super easy. The armored cars and tanks have orders to advance to cover, which they cannot do. There is no way they can advance into cover as this hex is impassable. So all of the armored cars and the tanks are going to hold their position, and because we're hidden in bocage, they cannot fire. The half-tracks, however, have movement to adjacent cover. That would mean they could go to one of these 3 squares. We're going to have them move here. They have a range of 1. They can't hit us anyway, and we're in the bocage, so German half of the turn is done. It's our turn again. So in our half of the turn, Sergeant Kelly and Sergeant Wagner can't do anything. Sergeant Myers, who's 2 for 2 so far in the battle, is going to fire at one of the Panzer IIIs. Let's see if he can continue up his luck. 1, 2, 3. He normally needs an 8 at range 3, but because he is a good shot, he needs 6s or better to hit. 2 shots at the Panzer III. 5 and a 10. Once again, I think that's a third 10 in a row Sergeant Myers is fired. We need 6s or better to knock it out. 10! Yes! Sergeant Myers writing his name in history here as he gets his third kill on only the second turn. Let's see if Sergeant Hart can pick up some inspiration from that. He's going to fire at the other Panzer III. Likewise, he needs 6s or better to hit an armored target. +2, but at range 3, he's going to end up with 6s or better again. 2 shots for Sergeant Hart. 2 and an 8. Sergeant Hart, whoops, causes an earthquake and drops some mortars in there. Same thing. Panzer III needs 6 or better to knock it out. 9! Yes! The last German tank is gone already. An excellent start for us, and turn 2 comes to an end. Let's move on to turn 3. So, it's time for the German movement for turn 3. We're not going to have Sergeants Wagner or Sergeant Meyer use their tactics counter yet. However, interestingly enough, by knocking out the 4 tanks, we've got the German battalion down to half strength or less, which means that on the movement roll, we're going to subtract 1. Which also means that we only are going to get them to advance into the open if we roll a 6, which is a little bit unfortunate. Maybe we'll get lucky, though. 1. Oh, gosh, this is not lucky at all. Retreat to cover and retreat for the half-tracks. The Germans are running away. This is kind of anticlimactic here. Alrighty, so their orders for the half-tracks are just straight-out retreat, run away. I don't think, I'm not sure if there's an advantage to either one of these. I'm just going to put them there because that seems to be within the spirit of the rules as best we can. The armored cars, likewise, are retreat to cover. I guess we'll just do this. I'm not quite sure which would be into their advantage or disadvantage to do. Maybe it would make, yeah, that sounds about right. Of course, they don't have any targets they can shoot at, so now it's our turn. Alrighty, this is pretty easy for us, too. Nothing's in range. They're moved off those city hexes, so we can't shoot at them. What we're going to have to do then is we have to start pushing forward, which is unfortunate because it means we might run out of time to do this. Sergeant Hart's mortars are out of range as well, so he's going to move up into the impassable forest here for armored units, but infantry units it's fine. Likewise, Sergeant Wagner, Sergeant Kelly, let's move forward, and Sergeant Myers is going to start rumbling out with his jumbo into the open field because he can't move into this forest. We have nothing. Well, Sergeant Hart's mortar is in range, but mortars can't move and fire, so that brings us to the end of turn 3. And with that, we're halfway through this battle, so we will stop here and come back for the dramatic conclusion. Let's take a look at the battlefield before we do that. Alrighty, thank you for tuning in. We will come back for turns 4, 5, and 6, and although this is a really good start for us, because we've obviously knocked out the 4 tanks, thanks in large part to Sergeant Meyer's heroic shooting, we're going to have to get the battalion down to 4 strength points or less, which means we have to knock out 3 of these armored cars, or, yeah, in order to get it down to 4. That's going to be kind of tricky to do. We're going to have to advance there, and if then they can fire on this. This is far from over, is what I'm saying. We could easily advance into these buildings and then have luck turn against us, and things are just a mess. Plus, it's going to take us a while to get up here. We could very well run out of time to be able to knock this out. So even though we've done well so far, I don't think the situation is still very good. It's all up in the air as we come down to the last episode. So we will see you on episode 13 in a couple days. Thanks as always for tuning in and watching. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new, please consider subscribing. We'll be back for the final episode of Sherman Leader episode Lucky 13 in a couple days. See you then.